that is what makes average teams good teams great, is that you have to have that heart. You can, all the analytics in the game doesn't tell you anything if you don't have that driving force in behind. That's what made that 96 team so special. And to get this team to where they're at this year, if you go in that locker room, there's that same type of bond and the same type of understanding that this only works one way at this point of year, is that if we do it together.
That was former Florida Panther and 777 NHL gamer Bill Lindsay, currently NHL analyst and covers the Florida Panthers specifically. And you are listening to the Up My Hockey podcast with Jason Podolak. Just watch me now. Welcome to Up My Hockey with Jason Podolak, where we deconstruct the NHL journey, discuss what it takes to make it, and have a few laughs along the way. I'm your host, Jason Podolak, a 31st overall draft pick who played 41 NHL games, but thought he was destined for 1,000. Learn from my story and those of my guests. This is a hockey podcast about reaching your potential. Hello there, and welcome back, or welcome to the Up My Hockey podcast with Jason Podolak. I am your host, Jason Podolak. And today we are going to, well, I guess first I should offer an apology because I have not dropped an episode in a while. So for those of you who are faithful listeners and have been wanting and wishing for new content, my apologies. Just other things had taken priority. The podcast is a beast to do, especially with all the production and clipping and social media that goes around it, not to mention the finding the guests and the interview itself. So it is quite a bit of work, and there's a lot happening in the background of Up My Hockey. As many of you know, that Up My Hockey is not just a podcast, it is also a development program, a mindset development program, and also an on-ice development programs as well. So my spring programs have just been wrapping up. I've been running 3 programs, 2010, 2011, and also 2009 and older group. And there's been a lot happening along with the mindset side of things with the program, the Peak Potential program, and the expansion of that. So my apologies that the podcast has taken a back seat for a few weeks, but such is life. And we are back in action with Bill Lindsay here today. Bill Lindsay is a former teammate of mine with the Florida Panthers. He was one of the cogs in the wheel of the 1996 run to the Stanley Cup finals that the Florida Panthers took part in, with John Van Beesbroek guiding them between the pipes. And it was the year of the rat, and there was a lot of electricity in the city of Miami and in the state of Florida around that team, and walked all the way, knocking off Mario Lemieux and the star-studded Pittsburgh Penguins in the conference finals, and then running into a too good of a team in Colorado at the end there, and they ran out of gas. But it's the last time that Florida has got as far as they have this year. So I got Billy Lindsay back on the show, who is now an NHL analyst with the NHL Network. He covers the Florida Panthers on radio and also in the studio. And it was great to catch up with Billy. Hadn't seen him forever, and so we cover that year in particular. Not so much about Billy's career per se, as is usually is the norm here on this podcast, but we are talking about Florida Panthers and the Florida Panthers from the 1996 season compared to now. What's happening with that team now? What's going well for them? We talk about some things to do with NHL goaltenders. We talk about being able to use your entire lineup and the value of your entire lineup, and why things are just clicking now at the right time. So this is a really great interview. It's a short interview as far as Up My Hockey is concerned. I think we're about 35 minutes, so it's short and sweet. Billy had to go get on a plane to Raleigh. This interview was taken the day after the 7-period game or whatever it was there, with Florida beating Carolina and quadruple overtime, and almost heading to a fifth period. So the radio announcer, the moral of this story is the radio announcer, usually Billy doesn't go on the road for radio, and the play-by-play covers the entire thing, but the play-by-play guy had 7 periods to do by himself on air on the radio, so you can imagine how exhausting that would be. So they decided to fly Billy up for game 2 tomorrow night. So he had to run and catch a plane. So we kept the interview relatively short by Up My Hockey standards to 35 minutes. But Billy has a wealth of knowledge, not only about the league, but definitely about the Florida Panthers. He's watched them for a long time and covered them. And as I said, he's also a Florida Panther alum himself. So he has some skin in the game when it comes to the Florida Panthers. So without further ado, I bring you Billy Lindsay, and welcome back to the Up My Hockey podcast. And my apologies again for my tardiness with the episodes. Enjoy the conversation. Billy Lindsay, welcome to the Up My Hockey podcast. Long time, no talk, man.
Yeah, it has been a while. It's nice to see you. Nice to catch up. I'm excited.
I know, it's crazy. For those listening, I probably would cover it in the intro, but Billy and I crossed paths at Florida. I mean, I got drafted by Florida. You were there. We met at camps, and then my first pro season was there. And I also, you probably don't remember this, or I definitely do, but I was one of the Black Aces on the run that year in '96. So, so that was a lot of fun for me. Dip my toe in the NHL waters and be a part of that amazing run that you guys went on there. So, anyways, and I got traded that next season, and kind of how hockey is. We sort of part ways, and I probably haven't had too many conversations since. So, anyways, great to see you again, man.
Nice to see you too as well. Appreciate
it. Maybe we'll start there. I know we're a little bit tight for time. I mean, I think that's why I was kind of seeking you out right now, because what an amazing time. One, to be in Florida, two, to be involved with the Florida Panthers, and you connected to the original playoff run that kind of put that team on the map. Maybe let's start with your journey and being a part of that team with Beezer and Niedermeyer and Shepard and that. Like, what is your first recall when you think of that run?
Early on, we get started down here, and I came from Quebec, drafted by the Nordiques, played a year and a half up in Quebec, and then came down here in training camp, and it was sunny, and I was like, this is going to be fun. They got the sand, got the water, got the ocean. And for me, that group of guys that you just mentioned right out of the bat, with Skrudland, Mellenby, Dave Lowry, Mike Huff, Tom Fitzgerald, Stu Barnes was here almost immediately. You could go down the list. Just quality people, quality ownership. First couple of years, we missed the playoffs by a couple of points. Then we had that run in '96, go to the Stanley Cup final, and it just took off down here. It was electric. The fans, everyone wanted to be a part of it. Everyone wanted to be around the team. And to me, that's where that excitement was, and why I always kept a home base here, and always wanted to come back here. I knew this was the place I wanted to retire. You move on just kind of through this and through the process, and I got traded a bunch of different teams, hopped around the NHL, but when I retired, the radio job opened up here, and did radio, and I did radio, television. Now I just do anything they ask me to do, pretty much within their organization. Just glad to be a part of it. But what really, we went through that really good start, and we had you were down here and were able to experience that fan base and how rabid it was, that old Miami arena. We lost touch with that. We hurt the brand. There was a 20-year stretch where we maybe had 2 or 3 playoff appearances, get smoked in the first round, and just exit the door. And we had to kind of get that reputation back up. And what's happened is we've got a commitment from ownership here, Vinny Viola, that he's willing to spend the money to put the product. And that's been first and foremost. So they've been able to put money onto the ice. And you've had 4 straight years where you've been able to make the playoffs. Now you get into the playoffs, you win the President's Trophy last year. You have expectations of just not getting into the playoffs, but actually doing something when you get there. Now you have the big trade in the offseason, Huberdeau, Uyghur to Calgary, bring in Matthew Tkachuk, and it didn't look like Paul Maurice was talking about playing playoff hockey during the regular season. Well, you got to get in the playoffs. It just never looked like we were going to get there. Start of the year, injuries. Flu bug around Christmas. We couldn't just get a healthy lineup together. And then finally down the stretch, we were able to get healthy, and we relied on Alex Lyon, an American Hockey League goaltender, to go 6-1-1 for us down the stretch. And it goes back to Chicago beating the Pittsburgh Penguins in game number 81. If Pittsburgh wins that game, we lost to Carolina the next night. Pittsburgh's in the playoffs. That's how thin them are. So this team this year has been fighting just like that and just scrapping away with it. But what you can see now with making these playoffs 4 straight years is you can see the enthusiasm come back throughout the community. The building is starting to get full. There's a lot of chat. So we're getting back to what we had in the early 90s, which is fun for me to see because it's been a long time coming. So where we're at here, conference finals, and beating what we've had to do to go through it, to go through Boston, the historically great team. We could have been out in the fifth game. Brad Marchand had a breakaway with 2 seconds on the clock. If he scores that, Boston wins that series. Or if they score in overtime, you had game 7, you had overtime, and this team just kind of found ways to advance to the second round, get there against Toronto, a very potent Toronto team, and this team at the end of the season just kept getting better and better and better. And then game 1 against Carolina, marathon. You go the 7 periods, guys are just gassing. Who is it again? Matthew Tkachuk did nothing the whole game. He was invisible. Probably, if you look back on him, he had 2 shots, 2 from the outside in 6 periods of hockey. In the 7th period, he had 1 shot with 30 seconds left, and he ended up scoring top shelf to have the game-winning goal. It's been that kind of run. Everything that needed to go right has gone right. They're 5-0 in the overtime session. So it's been magical. There's no other way to describe it. It's been magical for myself and for the community. The trades worked out, and we'll see where it takes us. Now we're 3 games away from a Stanley Cup final for the second time in franchise history.
Yeah, that's crazy. I'm glad you mentioned that about Tkachuk, because I watched it with my son, and I was saying, like, Tkachuk's dead. Like, he looked dead. He looked like he was in quicksand. Like some guys, like Bennett, like, look, you just watch as that thing drags on. Like, who still has like some jump? Who still has some life? And you're right. I didn't notice Tkachuk at all. Then all of a sudden, bam, it's top shelf and it's game over. And that was pretty cool to see. But yeah, I want to contrast the two, because I don't want to jump directly into the team now. Like that 96 team, like what made that special in your opinion? Because you talk about fight and you talk about Klon. There was a bit of an identity to that team of a workman-like blue collar sort of group, a little more star power on the team, I think, this year, right, with the big names. But what was the thing that galvanized your group there in 96?
Just, you have these guys, like these leadership guys that I was around. I was still a pretty young kid at that time when I broke in. But to see these guys, and once you got into that playoff scenario, but these guys are working so hard. And Brian Scrudlin and Scott Mellenby both, just Brian Scrudlin explained it to me the best. He said, no matter how you play or whatever, he says, never go home feeling he's working so hard. And he explains to me, you know why I work so hard, Billy? I do it partly for myself, but I also do it for you, because I understand that I'm responsible for your career as well, and vice versa. You gotta understand that all these guys in this dressing room, how you play, you're responsible for every single one of them for your effort. So there is nothing that we can do in this dressing room that we have to do it with effort, because if everyone relies on everyone else to feed their family, not only yourself. So there's no room for selfishness, ego. It all has to be put aside. And when you realize that, when you see someone working beside you that is so competitive and so hungry, the fear of the disappointment of letting them down becomes such a motivating and driving force, even beyond yourself. You're like, man, if I go home tonight, if I play terrible, I'm not feeling bad about myself. I'm feeling bad about the other 18, 19 guys in the locker room. And that's what developed with that team, is that this belief that we are working so hard together, and it is for each other. And that was one of the tightest groups that I've ever been involved with. And that is what makes average teams good teams great, is that you have to have that heart. All the analytics in the game doesn't tell you anything if you don't have that driving force in behind it. That's what made that 96 team so special. And to get this team to where they're at this year, if you go in that locker room, there's that same type of bond and the same type of understanding that this only works one way at this point of year, is that if we do it together. If we don't do it together, you just look at the Edmonton Oilers that play Connor McDavid and Draisaitl 25 minutes a night. There's 3-4 guys sitting on the bench that don't even feel part of the team. If you play 5-6 minutes a night, some nights I've played it. Half the time you sit there and you're like, yeah, whatever. I'll play my 5-6 minutes, but this is not fun for myself. In 95, 96, everyone was involved. The coaches made sure. And you've got that this year that everyone kind of has an identity on the team. And it's something that a coaching staff and an organization that you have to search for. You have to be able to find those type of players. That's what it was like in 96. And that's where they're getting to here with this team. This team has a legitimate chance not only to get to a Stanley Cup, but win a Stanley Cup.
Yeah, that's great. I like the way you talk about that with McDavid and Draisaitl. And isn't that just the most difficult decision in the world for a coach, right? You have two of the best players in the world. You want them on the ice, but protecting their minutes, protecting their energy levels, making sure everyone else is involved. And I did think that the Oilers had some great depth this year that they didn't use enough. I thought they had more depth than they've had in a long time. But yeah, how do you balance that as a coach? Do you feel Maurice is doing a good job with that with his group there right now?
Yeah, you could see it in overtime that Lomberg and Eric Stahl, one of the three Stahls in this playoff series, but Eric Stahl and Colin White, he relies on those guys, and he put them out there in overtime. Lomberg had the goal that was disallowed, that called back, but there's a trust factor there for that fourth line that they're going to get their 8, 9, 10 minutes, and that is very critical. And I worked with Bruce Boudreau at the NHL Network that's had a lot of success with the Washington Capitals, Anaheim, been a long-time coach for forever. And when he's coaching Ovechkin, he would actually, and Backstrom, he would actually go to him and point out the games that they were at 18 to 19 minutes compared to the games where they played 22 and 23. And their production was much higher when they were at the 18, 19 minute mark as compared to when they had to force and go over to the 22, 23 minute mark. So coach, you have to develop that trust and that underlying support of your team, because then they become they feel much more part of a team, but they're there for a reason. You have those guys there for a reason to do a job. Let them do their job. Bring your superstars down. They're going to be more productive. And when you got Vegas is like that, Dallas is like that, Carolina is definitely like that, and we're there too with the four. It's 4 lines now. 4 is going to be 3 any time of the week, and that's where this group is at now. And Paul Maurice he's having fun just coaching this group. He's enjoying every second of it, and that's filtering down to the locker room. But these players believe in each other and their coach.
He's definitely a fiery, emotional guy. I didn't realize Maurice was that animated. Like he's involved. Maybe similar to a Doug McLean. Like Doug would get animated there on the bench too, right? From time to time, and I think that might be a little bit of the hallmark of the team, right? I mean, you have that edge, and they're kind of playing with a little bit that with that edge as well. Both groups, and the other thing that I see of a commonality is one, the resurgence of Bobrovsky. Compared to that run that Van Beesbrook had that year. I think we'd all be kidding ourselves if that the Panthers wouldn't be in the final if Beezer wasn't as great as he was there in 96. And now out of kind of resurrected from the ashes almost, it looks like Sergei Bobrovsky is back to Vezina goaltending winning Sergei Bobrovsky.
Mm-hmm. You get Bobrovsky, and you're right about Van Beesbrook. We didn't have a superstar on that team, but we did in net. And because of that allowed us to do in large portion. You have to have the goaltending. Yeah. Sergei Bobrovsky has been signed a big contract, $70 million, 7 years, $10 million a year. First 3 years, mediocre average. And in this playoffs, if you pay attention to the games, what the Panthers have done well and why Alex Lyon, an American Hockey League goaltender, could come up and have success. One of the best neutral zone teams in the NHL are the Panthers at this very moment. 3-on-2s, 2-on-1s, breakaways. So tough to come by. Especially, you just don't. And so they've been able to insulate their goaltending. that's helped out Sergei Bobrovsky. But when they've needed him most, when they've been out of gas in the Toronto game #2, where they had nothing left after being on the road at 7 games, play 2 games, they had nothing left, held on to that 3-2 lead. Bobrovsky, that's a goaltending win. There was a goaltending win where he stopped 44-47 in game 5 against Boston. There's been certain points where this Panther team just didn't have their A game, but their goaltending did, and was able to cover up for that mistakes. He's won a couple of Vezinas for a reason. He's been able to find that form. The teams have been better around him. And the insanity of playoff hockey is that if he plays well for 2 months, and this team did win a Stanley Cup, those average, mediocre, below average first 3 years, and 3 more years still remaining on the contract, nobody cares. No. $70 million contracts going to be the price tag. If you play 2 great months of hockey, might end up winning. Kachuk or him, if we won, would end up winning the Conn Smythe. You paid off your $70 million contract in 2 months. Congratulations. Here you go. So he's on it, though. Down low, beatable, side to side, just looks more focused than I've ever seen him before. So really excited about Sergei Bobrovsky, and see where it takes him here down the road.
Yeah. Both those tendies were locked in last night. Anderson just looked like nothing was going to go by him. He was making some crazy saves in tight up with his shoulders and his arms. And Bobrovsky was seeing stuff through people. Like that once the glove save he made, I had no idea that he could even see it. And then he pops out and puts right in his glove. Like, I love watching goalies when they're on. And they were both really on last night. It was kind of sad to see one of them had to be a loser in that event. Just going to take a short break from the conversation with Billy to share something with you that is just happening. It's of the now. It's right now. And it was an idea that I had coming back from the Program of Excellence provincial tournament for U15 players. That'd be 2009 born players in Penticton this past weekend. My son Hudson, who's a 2009 born, was identified from the regional camp of BC Hockey to attend the provincial camp. So it was I'm not even sure how many players, but there was 8 teams there. There was 4 lines of forwards and 6D and 2D. I mean, 2 goalies on each team. And it was an amazing, it was amazing for those players to be able to come together and to share some time in BC Hockey. Did what they do there. But I left that weekend and I felt like I wasn't alone, and just thinking that things could have been a bit better. I felt that there was runtime periods, for instance. There was 4 lines, like I said, of players at forward, so you don't get too much ice time in those situations. And because of the big rosters, the heavy rosters, I felt that there just wasn't. Maybe there was some players that shouldn't have been there, that it wasn't quite as high caliber as it could have been. So when I was leaving that, I was like, why don't they have another step at this? I know at the major Bantam level they do. And so it gave me the idea of bringing the top 68 kids together from the province of BC and have a tournament. It would be a first crack for WHL scouts to watch the next year's draft class. It would also be an opportunity to bring the private hockey players in. In British Columbia, there is a league called the JPHL that is branched out from Hockey Canada. So they are an unsanctioned league. And because they're an unsanctioned league, they are not able to participate in the BC hockey events. But as far as me running a private event, I could do something like that. So I was like, well, we can get the JPHL kids. We can make it more exclusive to 68 players. So that would be 4 teams of 17 players, 9 forwards, 60, 2 goalies. Have a round robin tournament, have a player banquet, have a guest speaker. Just do it the way it should be done. Full length game, stop time, 3 referees. The way hockey's meant to be played. Let these kids compete. Let these kids see what's actually out there, and provide a stage for and an experience for players and parents to just have an amazing time. So that's what's been happening. I named it the UMH 68. So Up My Hockey 68, the UMH 68, the BC Provincial Invitational. And we're going to try and see if we can get this off the ground. While I was at the provincial tournament, I was able to scout everybody there. I actually did that without even knowing that this was going to be coming. I just wanted to see who the 2009s were in the province and kind of understand what the landscape looked like for the draft year next year, the WHL draft. And because I did that, I have a very good idea of who the top I guess 3 teams would be out of those 8. And again, there would be a team of 17 players dedicated from the JPHL to my event. So that's what's happening. It's going to be released this week. I've identified who the players are. The invites will be going out. As with anything new, you never know what the response is going to be or how it's going to work. It's all come together in like 6 days. But I'm super excited because the concept I know will be amazing. I know what I can put on here in Vernon. The ice was available. The venue's fantastic. I found a host hotel, banquet room set up. We can get NHL alumni, coaches. The whole thing, I think, is going to be a pretty bang-up job and give these kids an opportunity to have some fun before they put their skates away for the summer. So, and for those of you out there who are local to British Columbia, this is also something that I am planning to do continuously. So for minor bantams, first-year bantams, and also for second-year peewees, I'm going to run it next year. So the UMH 68, the U14 age group is not really recognized. So it'll be a tournament in June that will get up and running. I'll have a whole hockey season to get ready for it and prepare for it, but it will be something that would be invitational. We'll try and get the top 68 players from across the HSL, HPL, and minor hockey and bring them together in a similar fashion to play some games. So by all means, if you are in either one of those age groups and local to BC and would like to know more, by all means reach out, jason@upmyhockey.com, jason@upmyhockey.com is probably the best way to do that. So super exciting, the UMH 68 BC Invitational. I think the concept is going to be a lot of fun, and I'm going to love to be the host of it and provide an experience that is needed here provincially to not only develop but also to celebrate the best players of the age group. So without that's enough on the UMH 68. Let's get back to the discussion with Bill Lindsay. 2 questions about goalies I'd like your opinion on. So one, Bobrovsky, I've heard that this guy just like sweats a ton and loses a ton of weight during the games, up to 15 pounds at times. So now here he is last night playing 6-7 periods or whatever the heck it was, supposed to come back on essentially a day and a half rest now. Do you think that the Panthers even consider putting Lyon in, or would it all depend on his recovery and his ability to get back to his normal playing weight?
Yeah, they'll get him pumped up. But you could tell he was tired last night. In his post-game interview, you can see it sometimes in the players' eyes and different. But of all the players, you can see how draining it was for the goaltenders. He just looked like he had the life just sucked right out of him. Yeah. But with the ability, you can get the IV the IV drip with all the vitamins. And you can have the constant fluid get back into your system and have the recovery. They're going to go back. Both these coaches are going to go back. Even Anderson, the way that he played, he still looked relatively fresh. But at this point, it's if you go with there, you just get as hydrated as you can.
Got to get him back up, right? That's the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, if he's exhausted and he can't get back, but this day and age, you're right, they probably should be able to get him back. At least they do have somebody that they can depend on there, and they like in Lyon. And I guess Bob got the net for a reason here in the playoffs and hasn't let it go yet. But I just thought it was interesting because it could be one of those scenarios, especially with a goalie that loses that much weight. That could be pretty taxing on his body.
Yeah,
Who knows
interesting how they bounce back. I'm curious too, but they're going to go with him. So don't figure it out in this day and age.
The other one I have, just because I've been talking about goalies for a while now. I have a goalie in my household, Billy, my middle son, pretty darn good one. But at this point in his 10 or 12 years of life, he hasn't grown a ton yet. So he's on the smaller side. And you know that of all positions in the NHL, goalies are getting bigger, and it seems like everyone else is able to be getting smaller. I'm just talking about now with Beezer, because Beezer was what, 5'8", 5'9", like he was not a big man. And in today's day and age, like he might not even have an opportunity to play in the NHL. Like, how do you feel about like the size of the goalies, and do you think that they should be obsolete now, a shorter goalie, or would Beezer still be able to play today if he was given the tools or the opportunity?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's the biggest position in the NHL as far as height goes. You look across, they're all 6'2", you consider it almost short. The smallest goaltender in the league is Ville Husso at 5'11". in Nashville there. So it's kind of different how you look around these guys and their stature, but 6'4", 6'5" seems to be the norm. That butterfly position, cover that bottom half of the net, and extremely athletic. But there's different guys that you can point to, and that Levi in Buffalo, he's not very big. It looks like he's going to have a heck of a career. He's around that 5'10", 5'11" mark. When you watch those shorter goaltenders, what they have to have is they're so explosive with their movement, side to side, up, down, more so than the bigger goaltender where it's just down in the butterfly with the slide, make yourself look big. And I didn't say, sorry, not Billy Huso, UC Saros was the
I was going to,
UC Saros in Nashville. Sorry, I made a mistake on that. But UC Saros is the smaller one. So if you kind of take a look at UC Saros and the way that he plays, and Levi, there's so much power and explosiveness, but it's changed. I don't know if I don't believe Van Beesbrook, the way that they play the net and how explosive they are with just getting up from the butterfly, covering the position. It's the one position in the NHL that's from 80s to 90s to early 2000s to now that has changed so drastically, just in technique. There's a million different ways now to play net. It's just kind of stop the puck, but they've lent their way to the bigger guys. But if you're a smaller guy, there's a way to train for it and find your way into the net.
Yeah, stop the puck at the end of the day. I mean, that's the thing that I just like. As long as they're able, you stop the puck better than somebody else who's bigger, then so be it. I mean, just let them stop the puck. But sometimes I've even talked to some scouts where like they're actually not allowed to scout somebody who's not 6'2" or greater, which to me seems kind of crazy. But anyways, that's another topic for another day. I want to touch on the Tkachuk trade that you already mentioned. So, huge deal back in the summer. Both teams felt that they were winners. Calgary thought that they did really well in that scenario. Calgary doesn't make the playoffs. Florida barely gets in. We talk about playoff type players, and also playoff type teams, and how there's a separation sometimes, Billy, between like a team that does well in the regular season isn't really made for playoffs, and maybe a team that's made for playoffs has a hard time in the regular season. So. Do you think there's some truth to that? Like, was this Florida team, maybe a better playoff team than it was a regular season team? And the players that they lost were more regular season type players than playoff players?
I would believe that. You go back to last year, and Jonathan Huberdeau did a lot for this franchise. Same thing with Mackenzie Weegar, but it's run and gun. It was all about speed last year. Transition game, not a lot of grit, not a lot of get after you, not a lot of in your face hockey, that type of mentality. And what you've seen in the playoffs this year, quick teams, New Jersey Devils, Carolina is able to shut down that speed, gone. Toronto Maple Leafs, a team that likes speed, not a lot of grit, gone again. The Oilers can fly with the best of them. Historic power play, but can you shut down speed with four lines? Vegas, yes. You look at the teams that are left, it's a heavy forechecking style. It's battle defensively. And so this Panther team, Paul Maurice was trying to get this group there all year, working on just hang on to pucks down. Panthers were the best rebound team in the NHL this course. That's where they changed their identity. It was back to the point, get shots, blue paint, rebound chances, players like Tkachuk. So that's been the real change, and they've been able to do that to get into the playoffs. And because they've got in with this kind of style that they play now, that you got Tkachuk that automatically, if you're wearing another jersey, just doesn't like you. Like I don't use the word hate a lot, but there's a lot of like dislike it. Like at this, if it's 9 out of 10, if you got a different jersey on, it's not, even if it was a family member, if he was playing against Brady. And Sam Bennett has that same sort of mentality. Radko Gudas has that same sort of mentality. Ryan Lomberg, and it kind of drags everyone else into this fight. It's mean. We're gonna if we don't get this done, you're gonna pay a price. You're gonna have some ice bags after this. We're either going to go around you or we're going to go through you.
Yeah.
They didn't have that mentality with Huberdeau. They like the pretty plays, the passing plays. So the change of identity from a rush team to a heavy forechecking team, Paul Maurice was working on the neutral zone forever, trying to get these guys locked in on the neutral zone. Finally was able to figure that out. Sticks in lanes, battle hard, and it's now they've got everyone. So that's more the identity this year, is that there's more of a, hey, we don't like you. We're in the playoffs here for a reason, and if you're going to beat us, you're going to have to hurt us, because we're coming after you with everything we got.
I love that Radko Gudas, and like just a throwback right now. The big burly beard. He hates everybody. Like anyone who goes by him is going to have a bruise. Like I love watching that, just because I have a little bit of a nostalgia back to our era. Like that was kind of how it was. Like you had to fight for every inch out there, especially in playoffs. And those guys, you knew where they are. And I guarantee you everybody on that ice knows when Gudas is out there, and where he is, and you have to be aware of him. It feels good to me to watch this playoff hockey, because the regular season for me is sometimes hard to watch, to be perfectly honest, because there's not much of that anymore. Right. Yeah. But they bring it back in the playoffs. I think the refs are doing a better job of it. Is not as egregious, like the line from how they call the rules to the playoffs. Like I think they're doing a better job of keeping it tight, but they're still letting them go. I think they're still letting them play and be a little more physical out there and a little more nasty, because I think there's more than just me that like that aspect of the game.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's to bring it back, and the refs, once the refs start calling too many penalties, they get in hot water themselves. They don't know what's a penalty anymore.
Yeah.
So the way I best describe it is, if that one bench just would kind of stand up like and be like this, then that's a penalty. But if something that goes unnoticed and you're like, oh, we got a power play coming up, that the bench wouldn't even notice, then those are the penalties that just should not be called. In the playoffs, it has to be something that, why didn't you call that? And all the fans see it. A little love tap, a cross check from behind, that if it goes unnoticed, like no one pays attention to it, then just don't call that stuff. And they've been getting better at it with the refs, and just letting them play. And it's fun to let them decide it on their own merits, because then it becomes a lot tougher. And 5-on-5 hockey, when it gets to flow, that's what everyone wants to see.
Yeah. Oh, that's fun. That game last night was great. That Verhaeghe call, I was like, oh, I was biting my tongue. I think they had to call it because it was a turnover kind of in the zone that was in. But even like that was like a bit gray for me, and I was like, I don't want it to end on this power play, and I was glad that they didn't. The other one, which is interesting, I usually don't cover like of the moment topics too much on this podcast, but that goaltender interference call. He wasn't like there's parts of it where I agree with why they did what they did, and they disallowed the goal. But the part for me that I would like your opinion on is like Anderson went the exact opposite direction that the contact should have pushed him. I mean, if it was technically goaltender interference, like he went right and the guy was going left. So in my opinion, I'm seeing a player not fighting for space, and I'm seeing a player that is actually trying to embellish what is happening there, and he got the benefit of the call there. Like, how do you feel about that whole thing?
Yeah, it's the way the rule is written. If Anderson's entitled to that blue paint, and I'm not. It could have maybe stood with a goal. The one area that it comes into play is that even though Colin White's coming into the crease, and it gets fronted by the player, so you have a chance not to enter the crease, the blue paint. Like he could have put the brakes on and not entered the blue paint, even though he has a guy kind of pushing on to him. So he actually, to me, enters the blue paint on his own accord. And then there's a little shove back. But once you're into that blue paint on your own merits, and you have any kind of contact with the goaltender, whether he embellishes it or not, you're probably going to end up with a goaltender interference. That's kind of how I feel about it. It wasn't as alarming as some calls that I see. I watched it and I'm just like, there's a chance this comes back. And I was feeling like there's enough there that the White entered the blue paint on his own. They made some contacts with Anderson. Maybe there is some embellishment on his part, but just as the rule book states, if you make any kind of contact and prevent him from playing his position or doing his job at all in that area, then it's going to be goaltender interference.
Yeah.
So once White initially enters that blue paint, that's when he's in trouble. And that's where the pushing and shoving could. So it's not it maybe could have stood as a goal, but you fight through those things. Are you okay? Radko Gudas grabbed a guy's stick. In the Toronto series on the way, a Järnkrok's stick on the way to the net. It's a holding call. Nick Cousins scores in overtime. You get some your way, you get it going the other way. To me, all the fans out there that blame refs or blame officiating, it's going to happen. They're gray areas. Some are going to go your way, some aren't. It's the teams that just kind of fight through this and just continue on like the Panthers did last night. Okay, we got taken away. It might take us an extra 3 periods, but we're going to end up winning the game. To me, the referees have a tough job. Toronto has a tough job. And there are large debates that you can have all the time. But as a team, just what's next in front of you. If it gets taken off the board, deal with the next thing that you have to go through.
Isn't that crazy though? Like the fine line. You saw it as a player, and now we're watching it as, I guess fans and analysts. But you talked about it. I mean, like the Pittsburgh loss, right? Like it's this close to not even getting in there. Like the post that goes out of the net instead of in the net. The call that gets missed. I mean, I even think it just comes to mind now that Edmonton. Ekholm, right, gets that stick in the face there with 5 minutes left in the game. They're down 2, right? Should be a double minor all day long. It gets missed. And who knows what happens, right, if that gets called. It's like those little margins of error that have these significant impacts on the series. And I mean, everyone says Boston was an epic failure. You mean they were this close to winning in 5, right? Twice, and now they're gone. So it's crazy. And there is something that seems special about what Florida's doing right now. There's just the energy about them, the attitude about them, the way the breaks are going for them, the things that they're fighting through. It just seems like it might be their year. And it's kind of fun obviously for you to be there, and for me being an old alumnus of it too, to watch them go through it. So is there any, the last question, is there any nostalgia with the rat there right now? I know the league changed the rules with it at all, but is that still a part of the environment at all?
Still pours down after the games. They don't throw them on the ice during the games, but after the games, that is one thing that's going to stick with this franchise probably forever. We got Stanley C. Panther, the major mascot, but we got a Victor E. Rat is another mascot. So we have a rat. We have a Panther mascot, and we got a rat mascot. And at the end of the game, the rats are in the hundreds that come thrown on the ice after these wins. They load them up and don't throw them during the game action like they used to. But Scott Mellenby killing that rat and that being the year of the rat is something that I'm glad that is going to be ingrained in our culture and our franchise, like the octopus in Detroit.
Right.
It's always going to be something, and it's something that's here to stay forever. The rats are here.
That's awesome. I didn't realize that. So I've never seen that in the covers. They come down there. So that's awesome that it's still a part of it, and they wait so they don't get the penalty, for the team and everything else. That was epic that year we were there. It was crazy. Patrick Waugh and the visuals of him in the net, and Scott Tinkler, as you know, I know you're still buddies with him. He was a guest on here, and he chronicled that story quite well, how that whole thing kind of came to be, and the rat trick and all the rest of it. So good stuff, man. I know you got a flight to catch here after the triple overtime game. Billy's been called out to rally to help out on the radio because the voice of the play-by-play had to do 7 periods by himself, so he needs a little assistance. So Billy's out on the plane, so I'll let you go and respect that. But thanks so much, Mr. Lindsay, for being here. Great to see you again, and good luck the rest of the way.
Oh, it's awesome to catch up with you, my friend. I really appreciate it, and thanks for all the stuff. And hopefully we can do this again here, maybe a little bit later with a Stanley Cup trophy. Who knows?
Yes, I love it. Let's do it. Thank you so much for listening to the Up My Hockey podcast today. My interview with Bill Lindsay. We'll be sure to have Bill back on again. Really enjoyed that conversation, and a little more current, present time than most of my episodes. That was an of the moment discussion, but those are fun to mix in too. Definitely an interesting time here with the Florida Panthers going on the run that they are, and how they just squeaked into the playoffs. And I thought it was a nice time to talk, just because of the 1996 run that Bill experienced as well. So as a player, which we talked about a little bit, that I was so fortunate to be a part of. My first introduction to pro hockey is marching along with the Florida Panthers to the Stanley Cup final. So that was a heck of a lot of fun for me too. So hope you enjoyed the interview. A regular episode should be out next week on Tuesday, which will be Ryan Reeves. On the heel of his father, Willard Reeves. If you hadn't had a chance to listen to that one, by all means, please do. The conversation with Ryan was absolutely awesome. Tons of fun. He's hilarious. He had me laughing a bunch, and I'm sure you're really going to enjoy that. So stay tuned for that episode on Tuesday. Till next time, play hard and keep your head up.